So I'm finally talking to Ian Hayworth. Is that how you pronounce your last
Yeah,
name?
Haworth. People have said it
Howard.
differently, wrong my whole life. Like, I've been called
Okay.
Haworth before, so like this is an improvement. I'll go with Hayworth if I had to pick.
Okay.
If I have to pick, I'll
Haworth
go with
or
that.
Hayworth. I'll just call you Ian. We'll just make that
That works.
easy for
That
me.
works.
So we were just talking offline, and we were just saying how it's funny how I think we've been trying to set up this interview since maybe January, I want to
It's
say, or
been a
maybe
while.
yeah, late December, early January, I'm not sure. And so we were just laughing because it took an economic collapse basically to get us finally able. Now my schedule's completely wiped clean, and you were available as well. So it's really nice to have you finally on the show, Ian.
There's definitely a silver lining, I guess. Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm excited we can finally talk.
All right, so hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Warrior Woman 91 as always, and you are watching You Got It. So I wanted to get your opinion first of all about this all this coronavirus stuff, because I have been very opinionated online, as I'm sure you have seen and everybody else has seen, much to their chagrin. I still talk, and like I haven't shut up just because of this economic collapse and whatnot, and that is the thing that I think makes people on the left and some people on the right very uncomfortable. But what's your opinion of all of this stuff? Like, we started with toilet paper raids, and then now it's completely, lockdown. We can't go to work. Do you think that this was like necessary? Do you think it was like underperformed in the beginning and then overreached now? What's your take on all of this?
I think we honestly don't know yet. I think the biggest thread that goes through all of these different discussions is like we just don't have enough information. And I think we live in a world now where information is supposedly at our fingertips, and I think we as humans get very worried when we don't know everything.
Yeah.
And so I think this is one of those situations where it's really uncovered an interesting kind of underlying worry in us as a society. When things go a little bit wrong, people lose their minds. Like, people stockpiling water and toilet paper and all these kind of things. Not that realistic, given that this isn't like a waterborne virus. It's like airborne or on surfaces, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of going back to your earlier question, I think it's reasonable. I actually think the US has done a better job than some other places. I think closing the borders early was basically like a fantastic proof of why border security is important, because you can actually close the door and don't just have an open party for things to come in.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll know the answer until later when we actually know what's going on. The problem is a lot of the data coming from where this first came from, China, is false. And the World Health Organization is just peddling their lies every day. And so it makes it very hard to know what's true and what's not. I mean, we were told that masks don't work, for example, and now they do work. And so I think it's best just to accept that we won't know everything and just try and be sensible. I think try and find that middle ground where we don't burn the country down, but we also stay safe.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest concern here, is that we seem to be kind of grasping for answers, not actually selecting feasible answers necessarily. We're just grasping for really anything. So you can kind of see it in the desperation play in the beginning when everybody was buying toilet paper, and people still are. They're stockpiling toilet paper. Why are we stockpiling toilet paper? That's what so many people, why are we stockpiling toilet paper? Well, nobody really knows the answer. We're just trying to do something. We're trying to kind of put a Band-Aid over the feeling of fear that we all have. And I think that that's been where my biggest source of frustration is this fear aspect, and how everybody, the media is to blame, and a lot of, outside sources are to blame. China's to blame. Everybody is just playing off this fear aspect to get people to take action, whether that action is good for people to take or not. And I guess that's my kind of second, just kind of bouncing it back to you. Do you think that we're overplaying things? Do you think that I guess my real question is, how can we have a rational discussion about this without, hyping things up and getting people, ginned up and just afraid, so they feel like they have to do something?
Well, I think the big problem we're facing is that it's an election year. I think it would be, obviously this is a hypothetical, it's impossible to prove, but if this was not an election year, say this was 2021, I think we would be facing a very different situation. I think the fact that we have Donald Trump, the Republicans, trying to make it seem, at least early on, like everything was fine. I think a lot of Donald Trump's rhetoric wasn't that helpful. And then you got the Democrats who are just doing their standard thing of politicizing like absolute mad on every single possible topic, trying to make Trump seem like he's embracing every element of racism by having the temerity to talk about where the virus came from in the first place. Yeah. And all of these different discussions stoke up fear, but not only fear, but kind of anger and a heightened sense of hatred for the people who don't agree with you. And so you've got, for example, quite similar to like the vaccine debate. There's quite a lot of people who are like, oh, well, you're not wearing a mask, you're putting me at danger. And there's a lot of these kind of discussions, some of which I think are good discussions, some which aren't as helpful. Yeah. And so everyone's hyper stressed, and that's never good. Like, you put people under stress, that's when the worst elements of their personalities come out. People don't make good decisions, people aren't rational. Yeah. And so it's kind of interesting. Like, I'm in California now. I've lived here for like the past 7 years, but my family are all in the UK, and it's a little calmer there because it's not a election year. And I feel like politicians are coming together and they're kind of putting everything aside, and that's what needs to happen here in the US. Like, that is the key to this. If it's politicized, then, I mean, the Democrats were calling for a recession a few months ago. I don't know if people forgot, but like, they were literally praying for a recession, and in a horrible way, this is an answer to a lot of their prayers. And I think I'll get some criticisms saying this, but there are some Democrats who are loving this because they weren't going to win in 2020. They were not going to win. And so now they could. Yeah.
I mean, I still disagree. I mean, I still think that it's going to be very hard for Democrats to win just because they have nobody on their side. But this
nobody alive.
Right, exactly. But the thing that this gives them is something to at least work with, and they can at least play off of it, even if Joe Biden is just kind of the stand-in guy. Like, he's just like the cardboard cutout of, here's a Democrat candidate, we're just going to put him here, and then everybody else talks about him and just kind of works with this cutout or the empty chair or whatever it happens to be. But I guess it is so frustrating that everything is politicized, as you say. And I also agree with you that if this was not an election year, we probably wouldn't be in lockdown right now. I don't think that a lot of the steps that have been taken, because if you look at like the swine flu, I remember the swine flu. I think I was in high school when that happened. And, you know, a lot more people died during the swine flu than have and are potentially going to during the coronavirus situation. However, we didn't shut everything down for the swine flu. And I can't remember quite I don't think that was an election year, but certainly like Barack Obama was president during that time. So, you know, the media was going to downplay it. But you can see how the media uses these crises and these different situations either for or against their opponents, or for themselves or against their opponents. So I guess I wish that there was a way that I could just put all of that aside and just look at the situation, and then, because I would probably temper my positions a little bit more if I didn't feel like my own well-being was being encroached upon. So I look at these economic situations and people losing their jobs. I know one family, this is again anecdotal, but one family has like 5 adults living in one house. They've all 5 lost their jobs, just completely gone. And I just look at that and I say, was this really worth it? Especially in a county like mine where we've had 2 cases. So like, was it worth them losing their jobs over something that's, you know, much more severe in some place like New York on the other side of the country? So that's kind of where my I don't know, fantasy of, I wish we could have had a rational discussion on maybe we lock down New York City, maybe we lock down San Francisco, maybe we lock down LA, you know, areas that are going, or specific populations that are more likely to have more traffic going in and out of them. I don't know. I what would your solution be? Like, if you were President Howarth or Hayworth or whatever however we're gonna pronounce your last name, President Ian.
President Ian. It's also official.
It does. What if you saw? Okay, I'm getting news reports and I'm getting reports from my people. Like, we're potentially going to have this disaster coming up. What would your best way, if you didn't have like the media to deal with? Let's just take them off the table. How would you, as dictator Ian, now we've upgraded your status, how would you have handled the situation?
So I think it would be strange for a dictator, but I think the first thing that politicians need to be doing right now is to be honest. And I think that includes being honest when we don't know things.
Yeah.
So I think one of Donald Trump's biggest mistakes early on was to downplay this, saying everything's fine, we're going to recover by Easter. You just don't know this, and I think that makes things more fluctuate more. So I think you need to, first thing is to be honest, like, hey, we're facing this problem, we don't know much about it, where a lot of information is being withheld. On the back of that, I think people need to be taking responsibility for themselves. One of the downsides of freedom that a lot of people like to ignore is the fact that that involves you standing up and taking responsibility for you, your family, and also like your community. And I think a lot of people have not been doing that. I think we've seen a lot of people like our age and younger who are just kind of being told like, oh, it's not going to affect me directly, I don't care. And it gets to a point where it's like a reasonable debate of what steps do you make as a government, and the whole point of government is to keep people safe. What steps do you take to protect society at large when you have people who just don't care? So I think if I were dictator / democratically elected president, I would also be encouraging people to like take this seriously. It's not just about you as an individual. It's not just about young people are going to be okay on average. It's about thinking about people in your community. And like, if you don't want things to be locked down, if you want life to continue, if you want to protect the economy, we need to be doing what places like South Korea have been doing, for example, in addition to their great testing strategy of taking this seriously and withdrawing yourself from unnecessary situations. Like, I have friends who are visiting elderly relatives. Like, stop doing this. Like, you are contributing directly to this problem. So I think the two things I would do is be honest and tell people to take responsibility. I think that's something our society is getting increasingly bad at doing. Is just not taking responsibility for ourselves. We look to the government to solve our problems. Everyone's doing this now. They're looking to their governor. The governor is looking to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's just a guy. Yeah. Like, he's not God, despite what some people would like to think. And so we need to be like, we can solve this problem ourselves if we're just sensible and stop doing silly things.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, unfortunately, we've got a lot of Democrat governors that are taking advantage of the situation and trying. They would love to become dictator. Gavin Newsom, everybody.
This is
going to become a meme on my channel because I've had a history with Gavin Newsom since long before he was governor. I think it was in 2012. He visited my local community college in the same area that I'm living right now. He visited. Was it 2012 or 2010? I can't. It was so long ago, but I remember seeing him walk into the building, and my one conservative friend on campus, and I were standing there, and he was like, we should go in and just ask him really uncomfortable questions. And I was like, it's just not worth my time. We already know he's crown prince. He's going to be lieutenant governor. I think this was even before he was lieutenant governor.
Well, when he was mayor of San Francisco.
Yeah, this was like way back, but I ended up not going, but because, in California, there's just there's really no like election process. Like, people are literally just selected and then they go through the motions of being elected, but there wasn't really any kind of a race. And so just kind of bringing it back to what we're talking about, this episode is just about my frustrations here, but one of my frustrations in California is just that we really seem to have no say in how things are said and done and who is really elected, because as I say, back in 2010 or 2012 or whenever it was, I already knew Gavin Newsom was going to be the governor. And here we are now, and he's, just really just savoring this opportunity to take more power. And I guess my question for you is how do we turn this around in a state like California that is just so set up? I just feel like I have no say in what's going on. And so that breeds, continual frustration. And as you say, it makes people more angry when they feel like they're not being listened to. And that's really just how I feel in California in general. So what do you think, if you actually had a reasonable version of Gavin Newsom, I know this is like a unicorn, but if there was a reasonable version of Gavin Newsom in front of you and you could kind of give him like your advice on how to deal with people that may disagree with him, what would your advice be?
I mean, I think we've got to go to the heart of what is causing all the problems in California, which is radical leftist policies. I mean, California is actually quite a diverse state politically. Like, people always think it's San Francisco and LA, but if you go a little bit inland, you've got a lot of rural communities, you've got huge waves of like conservative communities all the way down. And so there is room for conservatism in California. The problem is that in the cities where a lot of the policies are driven and a lot of the money is, you've got this idea that it's not the policy that's wrong, it's just the amount of money that's being poured into it. And so you've got a city that I'm an hour away from, San Francisco, that is just, like, to quote Donald Trump, an S-hole. It's just awful. Yeah. And you hear people talking about, how do we solve this? Oh, it's just more money. We just need to put more resources in. It's because people are homeless because houses are too expensive. It's not because we basically decriminalize crime.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to get to the heart of what is wrong, which is the radical leftist policies. The problem is that's like an intricate and intrinsic view of a lot of people on the left in California, as I'm sure you know, you meet them every day.
Yeah.
Trying to tell them, like, hey, conservatism might be the solution to a lot of these problems. You almost get laughed at.
Yeah.
It's going to be very hard. I don't think we're going to be able to overturn the left in terms of, like, congressional districts. I think that's going to be near impossible. I'm very surprised that California hasn't been going back to a conservative governor. I think if we had a governor who ran on crime, he would win overnight, because crime is just rampant in California. Like, people don't believe me when I tell them from out of state. Like, San Francisco, you can go into a store as long as you steal, I think, under $900 worth of stuff. They can't or won't arrest you. I mean, it's insane. And so I think there are a lot of people who are quietly wishing we had a more conservative politics here, but it's going to be very hard on any level other than, like, a governor level, I think.
Yeah.
I don't really see a solution because, of course, a lot of people are just leaving.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people leave, and then California gets worse and worse. Same for New York. Same for a place like Massachusetts, for example. I don't know. I'm honestly not that confident about it. I think all we can do is people like you and I try and talk to as many people as we can. And try and speak to people who maybe don't agree with us, but often they're shouted down. It's a very hard problem, and I admit I don't really have the answer to it. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, especially because you've got people who are just so ideologically married to the leftist ideology. It's not even about politics, because I kind of view my own, like, just personally, I have my own personal, like, religious views, and then I have my political views, and those, you know, while I still hold them close, I don't draw my identity from them, if that makes sense. But then you approach a leftist, and if you question their you know, political view or their political agenda, it's as if you stab them in the heart. Like, I've had visceral reactions from people when I've made what I think are just reasonable statements, or I've questioned somebody's thoughts on something, and it's as if I ran them over, and I just threw them over a cliff or something. Like, I physically injured them just by saying something. And I think that's where the left's ideas of microaggressions and, you know, hate speech come from, is it's that visceral reaction that they feel because they identify their ideology is how they draw it's where they draw their identity from. And so it's just something that really leftists have a problem with. And I don't know, you know, in order to change that, that's an individual problem. That's not that's not a me fixing you problem. You got to fix that. Like, bro over there, you got to, like, calm yourself down. You got to find a new place to draw your identity from, because otherwise, what happens when your political party ends up failing you? Because I've had that happen. Like, I think I was I drew some more of my identity probably from my conservative beliefs, and then I felt like, you know, especially when Trump came in, I was like, that doesn't really jive with me, and so I kind of, you know, backed off from maybe establishment politics a little bit because of that, and I've seen it happen to other people too. So I don't know, what would you say to a leftist who is just so ingrained in their ideology, but maybe is wondering why am I so angry all the time? Or why can't I have a conversation with my conservative relative? Or why am I having problems socially here? What would you say to them? How can we try to, I don't know, explain how you don't have to draw your identity from your politics?
I mean, I think that's a big part of the answer there, is that you can't tie your sense of moral worth and your sense of identity from your political view. I think it's incredibly dangerous. I think a byproduct and to some extent a cause of that is also that a lot of elements of society that used to, like, serve these roles have been slowly eroded. So your sense of your immediate community and your family have been eroded by leftism. You've got religious communities which have been kind of eroded away and kind of diminished in terms of their worth in society. And so what's left is eventually just your view on various political areas. And a big part of that as well is that this is a big success of the left and Democrats especially, is that they have tied every single one of their views to the assumption of the moral high ground. It's not that they agree that, like, two sides agree on a problem and they have a disagreement on the solution. It's that their view of the solution is tied so deeply to the moral high ground and moral superiority. And so if you disagree with their solution, you are disagreeing not only with their standing morally, but you are basically proving yourself to be of far lower moral standing than them. And you see that with every single debate. So say, let's take a classic, which is gun control. If you disagree with their policies on gun control, say like, oh, I don't think so-called assault rifles should be banned.
Right.
It's because you are a morally bereft human being who wants children to die. It's not because you necessarily think that that is a solution or that is a constitutional possibility. It's because you want children to die. Same with abortion. It's not that, like, I think abortion is one of these interesting ones because that is wholly moral. But if you disagree with abortion, it's because you want women to die.
Yeah.
I mean, we can dig into that a little bit too, because that's just, I think, one of the most ridiculous debates that exists right now. But every single one of their debates comes down to, at its core, the assumption that they are morally right. I mean, you've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of her many famous quotes of saying, like, oh, it's not about being factually accurate, it's about being morally right. And it's like, well, that's their view. It doesn't matter about facts, it doesn't matter about logic, it doesn't matter about reason. They're morally right. So they're in a realm that you can't really debate upon because they've assumed they're right. You can't change that. And so I think whenever I debate with people who are willing to debate on this kind of thing, I try and start with the agreeing on the problem and make them realize that, hey, we actually both agree that something like mass shootings are bad, right? Something as obvious as that. Once they realize that, oh, hey, this person also thinks mass shooting is bad, then it's about the solution to the problem that we both agreed is the problem. And I think quite often conservatives skip that step because it's a given that it's a problem. And then we give them that, we kind of seed that assumption. It's hard though, because there are a lot of people who use this moral game as a way of avoiding debate. Like, I'm not going to debate with you because you're just morally reprehensible. Why would I debate with someone who's, to quote Hillary Clinton, deplorable?
Right. Yeah.
If you degrade a person to that level, they're not even worth your time. And so it's very hard to break through that, and you have to pick and choose your moments. But yeah, agreeing on the problem, I think, is an important first step, because that's almost always ignored.
I really do think that it's a lazy way to argue with somebody, because it means that you don't actually have to think about your argument. If you can just basically other anybody who disagrees with you and make them be the morally untouchable, then you don't have to engage with them. It's like, if you turn everybody into the alt-right, or if you turn everybody into a Nazi, because being a Nazi is universally considered bad by everybody except Nazis. But so it's kind of, you can't have a conversation with somebody who assumes that you're a Nazi or assumes that you are an untouchable. And that's just kind of where we've come with a lot of people on the left. And unfortunately, I've seen it happen with there's been a lot of infighting with conservatives, especially over this virus, where, if you disagree on the solution to the problem, then all of a sudden, oh, I can't talk to you anymore. So there's something wrong with you. And I've actually lost friends over this. So
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, again, it comes to being able to separate your identity from your political views. And I just think that both people on the left and people on the right have a hard time doing that, especially people on the left. So, Ian, I want to make sure that I get in any last questions. Did you have anything that you wanted to plug, or I know you have a show. Where can people find you online?
So I have a podcast called The Ian House Show. So it's on YouTube and iTunes, basically everywhere you can find podcasts. And then I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So my handle is IGHAWORTH. And so you can find me there. I'm on Twitter a lot because there's really nothing else to do right now.
Right.
So yeah, check me out there. And yeah, I'm trying to do some more of these kind of discussions as well. I think it's really helpful during this time, especially, to be talking about some of these issues. I think it's amazing we have the internet right now. So I think more people should be embracing some of these amazing platforms we have to try and get through this difficult time together.
Yeah, just to kind of wrap things up, I can't imagine going through this without the internet, not being able to talk to anyone.
I know. It would be unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, that's what happened in 1918, right, with the Spanish flu, and not good times.
No, yeah, it's kind of crazy. All right, so well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Ian. Everybody should like this video, subscribe to my channel, ring the bell, because if you don't, you will not find out that I have new videos, and that makes me upset. And we don't want to make me upset, because then I go on rants on Twitter and it gets out of control and crazy. So again, thank you so much, Ian, for coming on the show, and I will talk to everybody else on the next episode.